Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in today's uh, community debrief. It always makes a difference to have engagement from the community. We have some good news, but before we get to that, let's have the technical update. Rao, are you ready?
I am. I just hit the publish button on the current one. Let me add that link here. All right, welcome to Community Update 232. So basically, the team is continuing to work on the LLBM LLBM branch to get the 013 beta 1 release. This last week, the team spent a lot of time reviewing the PRs and merging them. You'll see in the code base now that a lot of the PRs that we've been talking about for the last several weeks, they're all merged now. But there is still some work to be done to get to beta 1. And that Tomislav is continuing with that, and Nadzipir is doing a little bit of that work too. But in general, the team is working really hard to get that release out as soon as possible. Most likely, or alongside that release or after the release, there will be some summer break, not long breaks, but short summer breaks that folks want to take. So there'll be a little bit of slowdown after that, but they want to get the beta 1 release out, put it on the test net, and let it sit there and be tested for a period of time, maybe take a little bit of time while that is happening, and then come back and finish the beta 2 and then on to the mainnet is kind of the current plan on that in terms of releases. We spent a fair amount of time this morning, and we had been talking about this issue about error reporting and error handling. And Tomislav has created an epic at that issue number 3769. This activity is very important because as we go to external validators, basically the cost of coordination of any node going down or bringing things back up all becomes multiplied. So the idea here, because some of those may be just local issues with a particular validator, whereas some may be a code issue and a cross-validator issue. So we need to be able to distinguish which is which and be able to respond to them in a timely fashion. So this activity here about looking at how is error reporting currently, how is error handling being done, how can we improve that so that we get out as much information about an error as possible to all the parties, so that whether it's a user error or a validator level issue or a code base issue, we're able to distinguish between them, and so are other people able to distinguish between them. So this will also reduce the time that the team needs to be able to debug something, and we'll be able to quickly say, okay, these are the things we need to be able to focus on and move forward with that. So for that reason, this activity is very important. Like performance improvement, this activity is basically, or the sources of potential error problems are very broadly spread across the code base, and there's a whole bunch of different things you can do. So it'll be an ongoing activity, but basically the team has discussed this space and decided that we'll initially focus on two things. One is identifying the places in the code where currently we are just giving the same error message for a bunch of different kinds of errors, right? So obviously that would be confusing, because with something like that, when you get error, you need to then say, okay, which of these 6 things or 3 things is this? And then that takes more troubleshooting and debugging time. Whereas if we make the error message itself more informative and provide more context, then that'll be easier to deal with. So this, again, keep in mind that this is something that I think now nearly 5 years worth of a code base is what we're working with. And so we're going to take a look at and fix the error messages in each of the modules so that they're more informative. So that's one kind of activity. The other, more explicit, more unique, more informative, whichever way you want to think about that. So that one error doesn't mean, it could be any one of these n things. So that's what we're trying to solve there. The second is to categorize the errors so that we can say, okay, this is from what module is this coming from? And perhaps also some degree of severity, but at least to identify what module it's coming from and being able to tell us whether we need to stop the node or not. That's the kind of thing that we want to include in the categorization information. So that scheme has not been fully thought through yet, but that's the second part that we're going to be working on. There are probably a bunch of other things we could do in this space, but this is where we're going to focus on initially. And then in terms of division of the work on this, different developers are familiar with different parts of the code base. So the optimal thing is to start with the modules that each developer is familiar with, and then start addressing this error reporting and error handling from there. There are other issues, such as whether we are filtering or bubbling up the errors in the correct way or not. So, but those are things that we will get to as after we address these basic steps. So that's one of the things that we'll be putting some energy into over the next several weeks in preparation for external validators. Stas actually has done some work in the testing area. I talked about property testing a few weeks ago, and he has now included Mockito to enable mocking of the objects so that the tests can be more decoupled. You don't have to test everything. You could use the mocks to proceed with tests in sort of a more localized manner. There's also a feature in Mockito that allows natural language-based writing of the tests. Maybe some of the developers in the community might find it useful, this as well as the property-based testing, I think, for testing in whatever you're doing. The other thing is, hopefully once some of you, if you become familiar with this and you notice that, hey, there is a certain part of the code base that is not giving you the right kind of error or something, or not detailed enough, maybe you can write some tests there to see what the problems are, or those kinds of things. So more testing is always good on the code base. Will has been working on his PRs, but he also documented in the last week how rev-define works. And this may be of interest for some of you to take a look at it. This, as you can see, it's on an outside site, hackmd.io. And there are a few other places the developers have been documenting, some in GIST, some in hackmd. We're going to create an index of all such documentation that's outside the main repo, on the main repo, like maybe at the end of the readme.md or beginning of readme.md or something like that. And at some point, we'll have to collate all of that into a single place. But for now, at least, we want to start with an index to the documentation. Matt Zipper, in addition to working on the LLVM beta 1 release, he's also been working with Dennis on an external customer project, and they're making good progress there. And then we're continuing preparations for external validators as we're getting ready, as the code base is getting ready. There's a bunch of other things around the policies and the procedures, contracts, all of that we need to put together. So we're beginning to work on that. So those are my main updates on the development team's work. Any questions or comments on any of this?
I know there was going to the error reporting. I know there was some discussion at some point about putting the explanation for the errors into some kind of a hyperlink thing. So, and when an error came out, you could click on it, it would take you to a website that that had an explanation of the error. Is this the direction this is headed, or is this a separate facility?
Well, I mean, that is another task. We did not discuss that so far yet. I mean, right now, basically, we just want to make sure that all the errors are explicit enough. And, you know, whether we should go to a more detailed, like say 1 page per error to be able to describe the error more. Certainly that's desirable, but first we want to make sure that actually the errors are explicit enough so that the team doesn't have to spend several hours to figure out really which error, what is causing a particular error, right? That's the basic problem we're trying to solve at this point in time. But yeah, what you suggest is desirable, and that's something actually on that epic. You can make comments. Like I said, that epic is not a one and done kind of a thing. It's going to be ongoing, you know, as is performance improvement is always going to be ongoing. There will always be different areas where we can handle performance improvement. So go ahead, put your comments or reminders in there. That was discussed, and that's certainly desirable, but you can definitely go add a reminder there.
The other question I have, you mentioned, what is it, Mockito has a natural language testing facility. Is this similar to Cucumber?
Yeah, actually, I'm familiar with Cucumber. It is similar to that in terms of the language. And I'm not sure if Mockito is doing that in combination with Cucumber, and that I have not looked into as to how it does that. But Mockito is really more for mocking. Like, say, for example, if you need a particular object for your test to use to move forward, what Mockito allows you to do is to sort of create or mock that object without necessarily having to run a whole bunch of other code to generate that object, and then you can do your testing against that. So Mockito's main thing is that, and let me show, so I guess, I'm just trying to see if there is something on Mockito that I can, obviously there's a lot of documentation on Mockito, you can go check it out. It seems to me like Mockito's natural language part is to generate Mockito tests. That's what it seems to be.
Okay, all right.
Cucumber seems to be more at the values level, but Mockito's main purpose in life is to really just give you the ability to mock objects without having to run a whole lot of the code base to generate that object and then test. You're able to mock the objects.
Okay.
So Bill, as far as I know, Mockito is much older than Cucumber. So I would doubt that Mockito is using Cucumber or is, you know, related to Cucumber directly. One may have drawn inspiration from the other, but Mockito, I believe, is considerably older.
All right, thanks.
Sure.
Any other questions? All right, over to you, Greg.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so I want to present some good news. The community came forward, especially the board members, and filled up what we needed to fill up with the member sale. So that means we will cover the closing costs of the investment. So everyone should be happy about that. And I'm very grateful to the board and the other community members who stepped up to take care of this. It's one of the things that makes me so happy to be a part of the co-op community. It's a very good community. So if you want more details on that, please come to the closed door session, and we'll let you know what's going on in detail there. Sort of in other news, I will say that the lawyer that we've been working with, who's been helping us with our Washington, D.C. strategy, he is drafting a cease and desist letter for the group that is infringing on our trademark, and also providing additional weight to the takedown notices that have been sent to all of the channels where this group is infringing on our trademark. So just so that people are aware, I don't think many people understand the credentials of our counsel in this sector. He's worked in not one, but two White House administrations, as well as serving staff in congressional offices. So this is it's a lot of experience and a lot of weight, and that's going into our response. We're not opposed to people using the technology. People can and should be using the technology to do what they want to do with it. But the trademark is actually owned by the cooperative, and people can't use the trademark without our permission. So, and if we don't defend the trademark, then it stops being an actual defensible thing. So we're sort of legally bound, legally obligated to defend the trademark when there is an abuse. So that's what we've been up to on the back end, sort of behind the scenes, and that was a lot of discussion. A board discussion yesterday had to do with that. I will also say, however, that we are in the process of building out a DAO structure for co-op members who would like to participate in a more legitimate and legally viable DAO structure. So if you look at the Casper Standup recording at the end of that for this week, we discussed with Raphael the shape of that. And so we'll be standing up a version of that on testnet in the coming days for people to try it out. And then we will go ahead and launch a legally legitimate DAO that does not cost an arm and a leg in terms of gas fees that go to pay for Ethereum development. So this will be built on RChain technology and using Rev, so that all of the DAO infrastructure exercises of the RChain technology and supports the actual Rev token as opposed to supporting Ether. If there is an LCA vote in October, the idea is that the DAO would become the essentially the economic or the electronic realization of the cap table for the equity side of the house. So I will stop there and see if there are any questions.
I just I had to get this right in my head before I asked. so there's a hard fork 2 coming up.
Mhm.
So the official mainnet RChain DAO will be rolled out after the hard fork. Is that how I understand that?
No, not necessarily. So we're working with Raphael to make sure that there is a dump capability for the official RChain DAO, so that we can dump the state and then bring the RChain DAO back up on the other side of the hard fork and reconstitute the state.
Okay.
Yeah, and in general, I do want to encourage people to remember that having a dump feature, a dump and restore feature, is important no matter what. Like, even though after hard fork 2 there will in fact be an easier mechanism, it's always a good idea to have a dump and restore feature as a part of your DApp. It's just good common sense, good practice as a safety mechanism in case there are any glitches or gotchas in the code base. So I heartily recommend anybody who's building dApps to have a dump and restore for any internal state.
Raphael, if we could collaborate a little bit, RPC is currently working on version 2 of our drive, and I'd be interested to see how you're doing your dump restore.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe there was a misunderstanding, but this dump feature is prepared on RChain token, but not coded in any way in RChain multisig, which is the thing we will use for the DAO. But yeah, we can work on that. Of course, the challenge is to restore OCAP object capabilities like objects. That's the hard thing to do. But yeah, we don't have the dump on multisig, but we can work on that.
Yeah, I understood from our conversation that in fact that's work that has to be done. But we can go through it together and see what the challenges are. I'm certain that there are workarounds.
Yeah, multisig is very much easy to dump. You just need usernames in relation with public keys, and that's it.
Yeah. All right. So any other questions, comments, concerns, considerations from the community?
I just wanted to talk about the timeline for the annual general meeting.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I just want to announce again, if anyone, we're looking for people who are interested in the nominating committee. So this is the group that will be doing the interviewing for board candidates and also reviewing IOBs. So if you're interested in being on the nominating committee, I'll put the email address in Discord as for reference, but it's nom-committee@gov.rchain.coop. So I'm going to have to spell this out for you. So it's nom, N-O-M dash the abbreviated form of committee, CMTE, at gov.rchain.coop, and I'll put that in Discord as well. And also, if you're interested in being a candidate for the board, go ahead and self-nominate yourself. We'll be putting a form for self-nomination in Discord as well. So the deadline to self-nominate is August 25th. So there's quite a bit of time, but the idea is that each week we will announce and solicit for any interest anyone has for being a board candidate. So, and once again, I'll put that form. It's the candidate director qualification statement form. We'll put that in Discord for people to fill out. So I just wanted to update everyone on the status of the AGM timeline as we approach October 24th. Thank you.
Steve, I wanted to ask, what's the criteria for being on the nominating committee?
Well, be a co-op member. That's currently the only criteria. So it's pretty flexible. So yeah, if you're interested, let us know.
Okay.
I note that we have not heard the weekly review from Daryl.
Oh, thank you. I forgot. Yes, you're absolutely right. Daryl?
Yeah,
No
thanks,
worries.
Bill. Thanks, Greg. So here's the week in review for July 7th to July 13th. On Thursday in the RDev work study, they did running RNode on localhost. On Friday in the Climate Coordination RCast, we discussed how to eat in a more climate conscious way and the soaring lithium battery prices. I also shared some updates about the Climate Chain Coalition, and Greg recapped the recent vote at RChain. I guess, Greg, you kind of already spoke about the Casper Standup. I don't know if you want to speak more to that. Let's see, also on Monday in the RDev member co-op planning, there was discussion of Smalltalk to Rolang translation and using RDrive for a FedWiki backend on RChain. Yesterday in the communications working group, we discussed maximizing the PR value of the investment deal, addressing the confusion in the member base on various subjects, and developing a frequently asked questions page. Also yesterday in the DApp developer work study, they did setting up the Argov development interface. And this morning in the active member hangout, we discussed the website widgets that Theo is working on to showcase dApps on RChain.coop's main page. And then we discussed Raphael's work on multisig. And Theo asked about using that for the AGM voting process. So some discussion was done on that. And then Raphael showed some DAPI basic domain name architecture. And that brings us to now.
Thank you, Daryl. So I did mention Casper, but I only mentioned sort of the tail end of Casper. For those who are interested, this week on Casper, the principal technical content was to go over some calculations that Mike Stay and I have been doing to extend the Williams and Stay construction, which Christian called native types. So you can view native types as a kind of restriction or simplification of the OSLF algorithm. And what Mike and I were investigating was to see if there's a simple and easy way to modify what they wrote up using category theory to a more to the class of phenomena that I'm treating with the OSLF algorithm. So in particular, for those who are interested in the category theory, the Christian of Mike's algorithm takes the UNATA lemma, so it takes the UNATA embedding of your theory, and then applies a sub to that to generate a poset of sub objects, and then applies growth and deque category of elements construction to that, and that spits out a type system. But the denotations of the types are effectively, at the pointwise level, they are effectively sets. And what we'd like to have is denotations of types that are other kinds of collections. And so the trick is to, the construction that we're investigating is an enriched form of UNATA, so that where you have M is at a minimum a monoidal category. In our case, we're looking at not just a monoidal category, but in fact a linear category. But M is a monoidal category, and then you get an M enriched Yoneda, and then you apply some variant of sub to that, and then you do the growth and deconstruction on that. So that's the idea, and at least for some toy examples, it seems to be generating the sorts of things we would like to be generating. So in particular, the example of M that we're looking at is the category of vector spaces. So for those who are interested in the way linear algebra is being applied to natural language processing, this bears a lot of resemblance to those kinds of constructions. So the M is the category of vector spaces, and linear morphisms between the vector spaces. And so if T is your programming language theory, then you get K linear sums of terms in your programming language. Is the category of vector space. Is the vector space that we generate. So it's very similar in spirit to word2vect, but not applied to words, but applied to computer programs. So that's the example that we were kind of running through the calculations to verify that this does in fact generate the kinds of denotations of formulae that we're interested in generating. If this works, it allows us to kind of clean up a lot of the calculations we've been doing over the last, 9 months, and slot it into a framework that is already peer reviewed. In which case, then we can. So if all of this pans out, and again, we still have several calculations to do, but assuming that it pans out, then we can begin writing code almost immediately, because we know how the construction works from the categorical perspective. We know exactly. In fact, there's even library support for the kinds of things we're trying to do, both in Scala and in Haskell. There are a lot of advantages to this approach in terms of getting to code sooner and having sort of a ready-made path for the academic community to receive the full scope of the results. That said, this morning I had a very nice conversation with Ornella Darda, who has put in a European research proposal to work with us on this work, beginning, if the project gets funded by the European Council, then she would begin work in May of 23. And so she and a postdoc would be engaged. So that's just about the right time. So by that time, we should be able to have figured out whether or not this approach pans out and have written up a draft. And then we can bring Ornella and her postdoc into the fold to help us, make sure that we haven't made any mistakes, and look at for potential generalizations or the usual sorts of things that you do in a mathematical research, and then take it to code in partnership with Ornella and her postdoc. So that's fingers crossed she gets funded, and that would be a big feather in our cap. Any questions about that?
So I think I understand at a very high level everything that you just said.
Cool.
I'm curious, along this path to next May or whenever it might be, what kind of academic papers would be released?
Well, there would just be basically just, I mean, depending on the nature of the results, but you know, I can envision one, which is basically an update to the Williams and Stay paper, which says, so this is their construction. This is what the original vision was. So actually, it would go the other way around. Here's the original vision. This is what Stay and Williams were able to achieve, which covers this much of the vision. And here's a variant of the Williams and Stay construction that gives us the rest of the vision. And here's some cool examples, which are not, you know, you can't do with Williams and Stay. So like, you know, vector spaces of row calculus terms, right? That's a cool thing. And, you know, a bunch of other examples that I've been thinking about for a long time. And then a relationship between that and the pragmatic vision, which is, you know, we want to be able to apply this to GitHub, right? And so the first application to get to searching a repository is we apply this to Rolang and the smart contracts that are stored on chain, right? So whenever you define a contract, a smart contract, it gets stored on chain. And so you can think of the chain as effectively a nascent form of GitHub. It's not really doing a lot of the cool versioning and diffing and all of the stuff that GitHub does, but it's kind of a proto GitHub. And so you can imagine that you'd like to search the chain for smart contracts that satisfy given types, right? And in this way, you can begin to assemble code, not by writing it by hand, but by searching what's already there to see, you know, which code is already on chain that does what you want it to do. And then you can assemble the pieces and then write the pieces that you just don't have any coverage over. So that's kind of the outline of the paper, right? So like what the vision was, where Williams and Stay got, the upgrade to Williams and Stay, a few toy examples, and then a discussion of the grand vision in terms of pragmatics. That's the paper that I would like to have written in at least in draft form by the time that Ornella and her postdoc. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that answers my question. Thanks.
Sure.
I have one other announcement. So RChain will be having our next ecosystem partner meeting, quarterly meeting, Thursday, August 11th at 6 a.m. I'll be sending out a notice to everyone who is currently a ecosystem partner. And in that email, there'll be a link that attendees need to sign a non-disclosure agreement because there's typically confidential information shared in the meeting. So, but I just wanted to let everyone know that we are having our next quarterly ecosystem partner meeting coming up here August 11th. So if a lot of people are, if you've attended the last one, you're on the list to receive it again. If you're working on a project that the ecosystem doesn't know about, you're welcome to send an email to ecosystem@rchain.coop. So if you're building on RChain and you want to attend the quarterly ecosystem partner meeting, please let us know, and I'll send you out the meeting information. And then following the meeting information, Lilia will be sending out a meeting invite. So that's what's going on with the ecosystem partner meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate you reminding us all of that. It is a very important social social function, organizational function within the RChain community. So, yeah. All right.
I do have one more question. Yeah, a lot of things on my mind today, I guess. I know that there's been some significant work being put into the RChain.coop website. I was wondering when we might be able to see that in public.
I think most of the stuff that we've been working on has been sort of approved thing by thing. So if you keep checking the website, like every week or couple weeks that we make an update, we usually do a pull request and then Ian or someone will approve it. The next update, I think, is going to be adding some of the highlights from the ecosystem, like RChain publishing and other things to the homepage, so that the homepage is more inspiring and kind of shows off what the co-op is accomplishing more clearly, rather than having people to go to the ecosystem tab and all that. So once that's done, I think Theo and Raphael are working on that. So maybe you'll see that within the next week. But I would just say keep looking around the website, because it's not always like bundled together. Sometimes it's just small things that are changed over time. That's just my opinion, but maybe others have other ideas.
I would just like to add that one other thing we're going to do on the website, the roadmap, we're going to update that based on what we know now. I know a few of the members had been asking for that. So I'll be working with the website team to get that updated.
All right. With that, I want to thank everyone for their engagement. Please stay safe. Enjoy some of this summer, and we will see you on the other side.